Hello, and welcome to this episode of Fractional Futures, where I'm joined by Dan Gwalter, an executive coach and founder of No Nonsense Leadership. Hi, Dan. How are you?
I'm very well, Paul. Are you ready to do this all over again?
I sure am. So, in the last episode, we explored what marketers need to do to convert their expertise into engagement to attract high-value clients. And I guess in this episode, I want to, chat with you about how marketers need to articulate their value and how to set themselves apart as a fractional leader. So in this episode, we'll be talking about defining your unique value proposition, how to communicate that value, and also look at strategies to tailor your message to different audiences. So Dan, we probably need to be a little bit careful on this one to not teach marketers how to suck eggs. I guess anyone listening or watching to this will think, I don't need to listen to this bollocks. I'm a senior marketer. I know everything about value propositions and stuff like that. But it's not the case, is it really? Especially when it's your own business and your own services that you're trying to articulate. But before we jump in, what are your general observations on this piece?
I mean, you're absolutely right. It's a dangerous topic from my perspective, and I don't wish to disenfranchise an entire genre of fractional consultant by any stretch of the imagination. But in terms of what I see, that transition from employee into business owner into consultant is a strange one. It doesn't happen instantaneously. You don't wake up one day as a business owner. So you tend to find that people drag with them a lot of their thinking in terms of how they position themselves. And unfortunately, that tends to mean that they accidentally position themselves more on the employee side of the equation than on the advisory consultant side of the equation. And I guess if you recognize that the compounding factor is that you've just become a solopreneur, the clue is in the title. You're one person. You don't have a team of people that you can bounce ideas off of, or that you can validate your thinking. So it can become a little bit of an echo chamber, if you like, in terms of your ideas and how you position yourself without anybody saying, well, actually, that's not really working for the market.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think over the last year, since I launched VCMO, I've easily spoken to over 100 marketers, either in-house marketers that are looking to come into the fractional portfolio work style, or people who are already operating as a fractional CMO. And these are people all across the globe. So I've spoken to people in Australia, America, Europe, Middle East. And my observation, speaking to these individuals, is that a very high percentage struggle with articulating their value. Some have told me, certainly the existing fractional marketers, they've told me it's taken a few years to really refine their USP, their UVP. So that's probably a good point to jump in, really. When it comes to you coaching your clients, Dan, on building their value proposition, what approach should they take to identify their key benefits? How do they differentiate themselves from competitors? And what common mistakes do you see them doing?
So I think when I look back at the people that I've worked with and the people that I'm working with right now, there are a couple of sentences that come up time and time again. They've almost become my go-to. The first is, nobody buys Swiss Army knives. And what I mean by that is that the fractional market is not a generalist's market. And, we see this regularly. People come into the consulting market with a view that they've got 20 years plus experience. They've done hundreds of different things, and all those things are great. So we're going to talk about all those things. And unfortunately, nobody listens. So that's the first side of the equation. The other side of the equation, and this should resonate with marketeers more than any other discipline that I work with, is that unfortunately it's not about you. And so it doesn't matter what you're producing. It doesn't matter whether it's content for LinkedIn or a website, or whether it's you're talking to clients in the form of written proposals, in the form of nurturing emails. That content has to be 90% about the client. Because if I look back at clients from my own fractional consulting business that I've spoken to retrospectively and said, what was the turning point in the journey that made you want to work with me? The most common response is, I felt understood, and I felt that you actually listened to understand what was going on rather than forming an only opinion and trying to bamboozle me with, all the great things that you've done. And so when I coach people now and we start to think about that value proposition, it is really important to understand what you are good at. It's much more important to understand what that looks like to potential clients, and how you're going to position that for potential clients. Does that make sense?
It absolutely does. And there's a great tool, and I'm going to give this guy a plug. There's a Graham Robertson, who's the founder of Beloved Brands. He's got a fantastic tool. He calls it his functional and emotional benefits cheat sheet. And this cheat sheet is literally an A4 bit of paper, and it's got 12 words on it. So for any product, any service, the value you get from a functional perspective is anything like, it makes your life more simple, it saves you money, it drives business results. So around these key words, there's some other words that say, well, if let's say the value you offer is driving better business results, how do you do that? Well, I drive business results by helping you achieve higher profits. So straight away, this cheat sheet helps you isolate what that value is. And you can do exactly the same for the emotional benefits as well. It's very easy to define the tangible benefits, the functional benefits, but it's really hard to define what those emotional benefits are. And I think people forget the emotional side of things.
I think, if we look back at the previous episodes where we talked about ICP and niche, the reason I was so passionate about people gaining a detailed understanding of their ICP is because a lot of that plays on the emotional side of the equation. When we talk about what are your ICP's pain points, I think pain points is quite a vanilla term now. What we really mean is, what is actually keeping them awake at night? Because if you can zone into that, and that becomes part of your value proposition, I solve that problem, then you're always going to attract the right type of client. And I think there are probably two models that I've used iteratively with pretty much everybody that I've ever worked with. The first is the X, Y, and Z model. So I help person X achieve Y by doing Z is a fairly standard model now for articulating what it is you do without it becoming a monologue. That's great. But if you want to put your own spin on that, if I take a tech world example, I was working with a guy literally last week. We were working on his value proposition, on his headline, on his go-to-market messaging. His argument was, I do the technology because you shouldn't have to. And that to me actually really stood out as a genuinely clever way of positioning what it is that he brings to the equation. So there's lots of ways that you can spice it up, but the key here is that it has to be about them and the problems that they're facing. And most importantly, how you are going to create that transformation into their world, be it physically, be it value, be it emotion. Those transformation statements are super important.
So Dan, that probably takes us nicely onto the next topic of communicating your value. When I guess a fractional marketer should find this part of the process pretty straightforward, but certainly for in-house CMOs that are thinking about moving into the fractional space, they've probably spent quite a lot of their time managing people. They might be great at designing a value proposition statement for their brand, but when it comes to your personal brand, it's a different thing. I guess the analogy is a bit like writing your CV. People struggle to put down their expertise in a concise way, and so I guess it's very similar to crafting your value statement. In terms of how you coach your clients, what are the key components of a value positioning or value proposition statement, and what evidence do you need to back this up?
It's a great question. I think you're absolutely right. I think this doesn't actually only apply to marketers. Everybody struggles with this. Myself included, when I first started, I really struggled with articulating what my value was, because it's a very unnatural experience to slow your own trumpet, as they say. But the key here is, as we said before, it's about leaning into the situation and recognizing that the person you're speaking to has a set of problems or a set of pains that you understand. And the chances are you actually understand the problems associated with those pains far better than they do. So the way I think about crafting any form of value proposition statement is to use a framework. Find a framework that fits the bill. And so, as an example, the PAS model tends to work quite well. Problem, agitate, solve. Because first and foremost, you want people to see it and read it. We are now a generation, if not an entire society, of skim readers. We make thousands of decisions a day as to whether we're going to emotionally invest in reading a piece of material or not. And the PADS framework gives you a really easy way of making sure that the important bit is at the front. The pain that your ideal customer is facing is the call out that gets them involved and gets them reading. So if you go through that framework, then the solve section is really your value proposition. And so traditionally, what would that look like? It would look like, if you're one of these with these problems and nothing happens, this will be the end result. As luck would have it, I've got 25 years left of experience solving that problem for organizations such as yours, and these are the outcomes. So it's very easy to see how you can flow A, B, and C through the PADS frame. It's just following on from that, you said that, what kind of evidence? That's the other side of the equation, that the battle speak. Most people I speak to have the same set of concerns when it comes to evidencing their experience. I hear phrases like, well, I can't say that because I was employed at the time. It wasn't my client, I was an employee, and I go, well, this is relevant. It actually doesn't matter. Whether you're an employee, a subcontractor, a subcontractor, if your skill set has created that sort of transformation for a client, for a customer, for a business, for an individual, then it's valid evidence. And so when we think about social proof, it comes in many, many forms. Some of it's the traditional, I did this and it achieved that. Some of it is case study material. So, tell the story of what was the problem when you first arrived, what did you do, what did it mean? And some of it's testimonial or referral type social proof. I think as good fractional consultants, you have to build up the library that covers all of those bases. And what do you think, Paul?
I had this problem myself because I had 20 years of, switching roles in different companies. And when I decided to launch VCMO, I had to kind of reposition myself, and I had to decide from all of that experience, what is it that I did really, really well? And for me personally, the common thread was transformation. So that's really the hook that I use when I go to market. And I guess that kind of for those individuals, for those executives, don't have to be marketers. It can be any of the sort of the leadership flavors. For those individuals looking to come into this fractional world, some of them are going to struggle to decide what that one thing is. And I've spoken to some of these individuals where they say, I can do the marketing bit, but I can also do the CRO bit, and I can also do the CPO bit. And I don't know which one to focus on. I'm a bit of a jack of all trades. I can turn my hands to anything and everything. But I kind of struggle with these people, not on a personal level, but I struggle because from a marketing perspective, being so broad is kind of, you're going to shoot yourself in your foot, because you're not going to be focused on where that value lies. If I was to come to you for coaching, how would you coach me to say, you need to sort of narrow down and focus on what that, the most prominent value piece is?
When we start to look at from the coaching program perspective, quite early on, we talk about sales funnels. We talk about how they actually work, and all sorts of problems arise when you go to market incredibly broad. First and foremost, very few people actually enter the top of your funnel because you're not saying anything going to one person. It's never the case that somebody reads one piece of content and it enters into your funnel as a result. They normally read 4, 5, 10, 20 pieces of content before they find themselves in your sales funnel or in your pipeline. And because of that, if you are too broad, there's a very strong likelihood that your content's going to jump around between topics, between perspectives, and you're going to fail to attract anybody. My way of describing this to people, especially marketeers, is to think about it as a campaign in its own right. So when we do that ICP and niche exercise, that's part one of the journey. These are the most likely candidates in terms of industry role, seniority, growth stage of company, budget, etc. Once you've identified that niche, it's really about identifying the pillars within that niche that you are the best of the best, in your opinion. A lot of what I do is about helping people on that journey, right? Because limiting beliefs are huge. But take it from me, if you do not position yourself as the best of the best, then the next person will. And you'll lose out as a result. So we identify the pillars. These three topics that you favor, areas that you are super interested in, super experienced in. I tend to say to people, these are the topics that on a Friday night in the park you still won't stop talking about because it's your thing. If you go that route, then you can focus for a preset period of time on one particular pillar that is linked to one ICB. And at that point, you're going to attract those people. And if that doesn't work, or if you decide that you burn that out, or you just get bored of doing that particular one, and it's perfectly acceptable to switch, you have to give it a sensible period of time. And the obvious question is, well, how long is sensible? I would say 3 months, on one particular pillar. In the same way that a marketeer would say, well, actually, a marketing campaign has to run for a period of time to prove its value, to prove it's actually going to work for it is. Is that similar to your experiences, Paul?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And with VCMO, we have kind of 3 audiences that we talk to. We talk directly to marketers, obviously for this show here. We speak to investors and we speak to owner managers and CEOs. And so when we go to market, our campaigns are very much focused. We know the ICP of those 3 audiences, and we build our campaigns, I guess, in a systematic way to talk to those different audiences. So I think it's very important really to focus your time on those audiences. I use AI quite a lot to help me build those campaigns, because what I do is I take my ICP and I tell ChatGPT what that ICP is, what they look like, who they are, what their pain points are, what keeps them awake at night, what are their objections to buying my service, what are their motivations to buy, or what's going to change in the big wide world that says all of a sudden I need that service. So anyone really can use AI very easily now to program the ICP, putting those various elements of objections, motivations, and triggers, and see what see what ChatGPT comes out with. And if you can come out with some outputs that are helpful, that will really help influence the shape of your campaign. It help you craft the right messages to address certain points that resonate with your buyer. And because you've identified who your buyer is, you'll be talking to them in a way that resonates with them. Oh yes, that happened to my business last week. I can see the value you offer here. So yeah, I really think there's lots of value in crafting really focused long tail campaigns over 2 or 3 months.
You hit a different topic there quite elegantly. I see it happen regularly when we do the ICP exercise. It's that people identify the wrong person. If I give an example, technology people that are in the cost reduction market, believing that their ICP is the CTO or the CEO, I have to challenge you. It actually isn't. The CEO has an interest, obviously, and a responsibility, but the charge will come down to the CFO, who holds the purse strings. And so, if you think about that in terms of campaigning, in terms of messaging, in terms of language, the language you would use with the CEO on that sort of campaign would be completely different from the language that you would use with the CFO, even if the campaign is exactly the same. And that's why I say, that ICP piece is probably the most important thing that you're going to do, because it plays everything downstream.
I totally agree. And I think there's another layer to this onion that you need to sort of get under or unpeel, is whilst you need that messaging specific for your ICP, you also need to tailor that messaging for different industries that you work with as well. So what we do with VCMO, we're sector agnostic. We can deliver marketing transformation in any sector, whether it's B2B, B2C, B2B2C. But there are different industry, there's different industry vernacular used. And you need to, I guess, be aware of that and use that in your campaigns, because you've got to speak to the right person anyway. You've got to speak their industry language, and you've got to address their pain points. And so there's multiple layers that you need to get right. Which that's why marketing is such an art form and a science, because there's a lot of layers that you need to peel and get right to deliver effective marketing.
Yeah, I guess this advice is relevant for marketers as it is for any other of the sort of C-suite roles, is that in my experience, if you are completely sector agnostic or industry agnostic, you still want to do your homework before you get into conversations with those people, because creating that natural conversational flow will require you to have a level of understanding, a level of experience as to what that industry has been through and how it got to where it is. So if I take financial services as an example, a lot of the things that we have to do inside financial services are as a direct result of various regulations that come out over the years. And if you've got natural experience of those happening as they happen, then you've got a much higher likelihood of success in that industry. If you haven't got it and you haven't learned it, you're going to come unstuck pretty quick in terms of conversations, in terms of how that feels, how credible you actually sound to the client.
Absolutely. Wise words indeed there, Dan. Thank you. And that's probably a good point to close this show. So if you've been listening or watching this episode, I hope you found some value from the discussion and take what you've learnt into the next part of your fractional marketing career. In our next episode, we'll be discussing how fractional marketers need to build trust to secure and retain long-term clients. So look out for that in about a week's time. Dan, thank you again. That's been a great conversation there. Really look forward to your company on the next episode.
Cheers, Paul. I'll speak to you on the next show.